about the goalie market. We're going to be joined by Carter Hutton in 2 seconds here, but I figured we'd maybe set the stage a little bit. And the first thing is, and Pat, I don't know if you want to flash them up. We were sent in a couple of mock trades. I think everyone kind of agrees that Edmonton's at the top of the list for teams that need goaltending. So there was one Oilers fan who sent in Thatcher Demko for, oh my God, Bo Akey, Sam O'Reilly, Victor Arvidsson, a first-round pick, like 3 premium assets for one more year of Thatcher Demko, which when you look back at the history of big-name goalies getting traded, you would never find one with this many assets attached to it. The other one we had was about Jordan Binnington, Frank. But as you talked about today on the DFO rundown, and this mock deal was the Oilers get Binnington, the Blues get a first-round pick in Calvin Pickard, maybe a bit more closer to realistic value there. But you think it's more likely that Joel Hofer's the one traded in St. Louis, not Binnington?
I just haven't heard Jordan Binnington's name out there at all. I think he was out there previously. There was a point in time with multiple years left on his deal, many years, that they were saying, man, this is a lot of term left and we got to figure this out. But I haven't heard that recently. And I think with the success that Binnington had at Four Nations, supporting the idea that he's a big game goalie, I just don't know that they're going to be moving him. I think they're open to offers on Hofer. They've been negotiating with his camp. At the same time, I think that the offer or the asking price has been very high when it comes to getting Joel Hofer out of St. Louis. So does that mean he'll end up transacting? Maybe not. He could certainly stay in tandem with Binnington, but I think he's one of the more intriguing names out there as a younger guy with a lot of ceiling.
One more quickly before we get to Hutz. You look at how thin the free agent market is. It's Jake Allen, and then it's what I would describe as a lot of mid on the market. Is that going to potentially bring prices up for guys like Gibson and Demko?
Yeah, I think how thin the market is probably will impact that. And there's just question marks with both those guys, and we'll get into that with Hutz. Like, basically, John Gibson has gone to a spot where and by the way, I wouldn't be shocked if John Gibson was part of this deal. The Flyers have been looking for a goalie for a while, going from Anaheim to Philly. But there's a lot to figure out. Gibson lost his starting job to Dostal. He's looking for a place to play. And with Demko, it's just the injury question.
Former NHL goaltender Carter Hutton joins us on the show for the Blue Paint, brought to you by Budweiser and Hutz. We're going to do a little goalie matchmaker here. You heard Frank talk about guys like Demko and Gibson. There's a Jake Allen on the free agent market who, a little bit older, but obviously wouldn't take assets to acquire, just dollars. Let's start with the Edmonton Oilers, though. You knew I was going to start there. They're the number one team that everyone's pointing at and going, they need a goalie on the market. Is it free agency? Is it trade? Who do you think is the best fit for the Oilers?
I think they have to get someone with some little more credibility and age gap. And the fact of the matter is we look at this team and yes, they were serviceable. And yes, it's an Edmonton Oilers team that got to the Stanley Cup final again. But when they needed the goaltending most, they never got it. And that's 2 years in a row where they need a guy to be a difference maker and steal a few games from. So I don't know if you rush right to free agents and overpay for a mid guy right now because of, the resources where they're at. I think playoffs are an easy for them to get back to where they need to be. So I don't know if you wait and you kind of see as the market goes, because it is I heard Frank talk about that earlier. It's a thin market right now, right? You look at Jake Allen. I don't know if he is the piece or if you jump on John Gibson. That is a big chunk of money, right? He's 31 years old. I do like Demko. I think Demko is probably the best available guy to go out there. He still is a superstar, but that injury status that just looms over him is worrisome for a team if you're going to make a big blockbuster trade to try to get a goalie like Demko and then have him on the injured reserve all year. It doesn't really help your chances. But I do believe that the Edmonton Oilers have to adjust. They have to do something different. They need a difference maker come Stanley Cup Finals time.
So if you were the Oilers and you've got a relatively thin trade market. I mentioned the 3 guys that are available are Gibson, who, by the way, is not in the trade to Philly. Gibson, Demko, and Hofer. Those are the 3 guys you could realistically trade for. Would you go on the free agent market? What would you do? Like, who's the guy that you would be setting your sights on if you're Stan Bowman?
I think if you could get Gibson for not a crazy amount, right? Even if you could flip Skinner down there, I feel like he has a chance to go down and play with Dostal and be in a good situation, right? Because I know they're going to want to have support there. My only concern with Hofer is again, you're getting a younger guy who maybe his mental capacity isn't at full development. I think he has a very high ceiling, but I guess I'm buyer beware because of my experiences in St. Louis, right? I was the backup goalie. I worked with Dave Alexander, who I believe has established himself as one of the best goalie coaches in the NHL. I had a league. When I was there, when I left, I led the league in stats. And then they had Ville Husso, who dominated. He left, big drop off. So I just see that pattern of, the goalies that have been in that backup position in St. Louis getting so much time with Dave Alexander to develop their game. And then they go on somewhere else where you have to play more minutes and it's a bit of a drop off. So I definitely think his ceiling is high, but I guess maybe buyer beware with Hofer, where I feel with John Gibson, he's a little more established. His game is very boring in that sense. He manages the crease well. And what does Edmonton need? They just need timely saves. They don't need anyone to come in there and reinvent the wheel at this point.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's go to a couple of other markets here really quick. The Philadelphia Flyers making a trade for Trevor Zegras right now, but they also need a goalie. They're interesting because they don't have the same cap restraints that the Oilers have. Last year it was Fedotov and Urson. Is there someone on the market you think makes a lot of sense for Philly?
Yeah, I do like Ville Husso. I think he's kind of established his game back. I know it's a big drop off, and I do think there is a bit of you get your payday and things fall behind a bit. And I also like Jake Allen there too. This Fedotov, we go to the KHL and we bring these big goalies over. We've seen it in Edmonton as well. And I just guess that it's a big adjustment coming over to the North American game, the amount of traffic and the amount of adjustments you need to make. And I think Jake Allen could be a good fit there in the sense that he can protect Earson. He can go in, and I think Samuel Earson is a very good goalie and has a very big upside. He had 22 wins last year. He played well. I thought he played well when he got a chance in the Four Nations Cup. But it got to the point where Fedotov couldn't get played. The amount of leaky goals, and I think the confidence that breaks down in the Philadelphia Flyers bench, where I think Jake Allen can come in and kind of be that stopgap to protect him. And again, Jake Allen's 34. I know he's not going to go in there and his better days are probably behind him. But his fitness level and conditioning, a guy I got to know and played with for a long time, he's still sustainable for a few more years to really help Earson get over that gap and become a number one outright guy.
Yeah, just a quick update, Hut, since I just tweeted the trade details. It's Ryan Poehling going back to Anaheim in exchange for Trevor Zegras. Flyers are also giving up this year's their own second-round pick. They had 4. They give up their own, which is 45th. Oh, wait, hold on. Actually, I made a mistake. It's not theirs. It's Columbus's. Sorry.
It is 45th overall, and then another 4th going as well in the deal. So
they're 4th in 2026. But the point is, just a quick aside on this, and we'll talk about this more when we get to the other side of the goalie segment. The Flyers, I don't think they gave up much more here than spare parts for a guy that has some really significant upside. Obviously, 2-time 60-plus point player in Trevor Zegras. So really interesting deal.
I agree too. And I think for him, a guy who early in his career kind of got the keys to the castle, right? We talk about being on the EA Sports and being kind of named the next wave. So I think getting out of Anaheim, a change of scenery. How many times do we see this happen, guys? A guy comes in, he's anointed the next one in a market. It doesn't go well. And next thing you know, a change of scenery and his game blooms. So it will be a big challenge for Trevor Zegras in a market that is going to be demanding. This isn't Anaheim anymore. They're going to be watching his every move.
Yeah, that's fair. I want to hit on the Columbus Blue Jackets. They missed the playoffs by 2 points last year, and you could argue with just competent goaltending, they might have comfortably been in the playoffs with the way that offense was humming. They have Merzlikins 2 more years at 5.4. They have Tarasov, the 26-year-old, who did not have a good season last year. Do you think there's a world where Don Waddell should just cross his fingers and say, I'm running it back with these two and hoping one of them's better, or do they need an upgrade?
I think they need a bit of an upgrade, and I think it comes from within with this team, right? I look at Jed Greaves and what he's been able to do in the American League and in his NHL games. He's got 21 games played. He's got a .924 save percentage. He was very good in the American League. And then I think you start the spot starts, right? See where they're at, kind of feed off of Elvis, because I do think Elvis has an upside, but again, he can be his own worst enemy with the way that he carries himself, and I guess maybe that rubs players in the market the wrong way. But that being said, Columbus is very close. I think Dean Evansson has these guys playing a good brand of hockey. And I think that's the biggest staple we've seen with a younger Columbus team with how skilled they are, is the non-negotiables that he's brought in there. And now they play better on the defensive side of the puck. So I'm a big fan of Jet Greaves. I think he, as an undersized guy at 6 feet, we're seeing it more and more when we see UC Saros and we see Dustin Wolf, guys coming in. It's starting to become undeniable that even if you aren't this big, massive structure in the net, you can still get the job done. So I look to see him a little more often early in the season, trying to establish himself as a full-time NHL guy.
Yeah, just as an aside, Hutz, I was talking to a Columbus player over the weekend, and he was like, dude, Jack Greaves is legit. So if they decide to move off of Merzlikins, if you go Greaves and Tarasov, obviously it's not going to cost you much on your cap, but I just have a sense that Columbus wants something a little bit more defined in the short term to help get them back into the playoffs. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does, for sure, right? And it could be that free agency player, right? It could be someone just to push them over the top because, Frank, they're so close, right? You look at how talented this team is. But again, when you look at the save percentage of Elvis playing 53 games with an 892 and Tarasov with an 881, Tarasov at times was so good. So I see the upside in him. But when you give up bad, timely goals, I get it. It's just deflating to a team, and you lose games before you even end. So I think Columbus is close, and maybe it is someone more established. But I'm a big Jack Greaves fan, and I guess we're getting away from that size where if you aren't 6'3", you can't play anymore, where these guys seem to get it done at any size.
I think Anaheim and Columbus could be interesting. Like if you think about John Gibson, there was a thing at least last year was like, oh, does he want to play in a tandem? Well, if you put Merzlikins in a deal and then you overpay a bit for Gibson, Columbus has an extra first-round pick this year. They have Minnesota's from the Juracek trade. Gibson could go to Columbus, be the starter for 2 years. 2 years from now, Jack Greaves is probably ready to take that step and be more of a workload guy. And if you're Anaheim, you have all the cap space in the world. If you have to take on Merzlikins for 2 years to back up Dostal and you go, hey, we got a first-round pick for doing this, that might be a way for everyone to kind of scratch each other's back.
It would be good too, right? And then I think you have a little bit of a safety net too, right? Where if Gibson wants out and he can go there, and then you get Elvis, who maybe he's more motivated in that situation. Maybe he needs to be a little bit of humble by the situation of being a backup again and knowing that he did have the keys to the castle. Because at times I think being outspoken and asking for a trade and what goes on, it's like deteriorating to a team aspect, right? When you're the center of attention at all times. And I always would joke around about that when I played. I think the easiest part about being a goalie is just being able to fit in, and because you're really not competing with anybody else but yourself. And I think at times he does a bit of makes trouble on his own self by being so out there.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, that is a wrap on this week's edition of the Blue Paint. Hutz, we'll have you on maybe next week when some moves start happening.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks for having me as always.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.